I wanted to take this opportunity to say thank you personally for all the wonderful messages of support and for your understanding.
The palace spoke without emotion, detail, or reassurance, and in doing so confirmed that something fundamental had shifted behind closed doors. When Buckingham Palace acknowledges change but refuses to explain it, history suggests that certainty has vanished, timelines have fractured, and the institution is quietly preparing the public for a future it cannot yet define. The change in language was subtle but significant. A statement released without drama that did not attempt to soothe, clarify, or project confidence, nor offer a roadmap forward. It simply acknowledged that Catherine's treatment had changed direction following recent developments. In royal communication, such wording is never accidental. It serves one purpose alone: to signal that certainty has ended. The palace, an institution acutely aware of timing, chose not to delay or remain silent, understanding that absence without context would provoke questions it was not ready to answer. Within minutes, a quiet shift followed, not in headlines, but within the system around Catherine. Staff were told to hold positions, schedules were discreetly frozen, and once forward-looking conversations became conditional. Language softened, assumptions disappeared, and restraint replaced assurance. This is how the monarchy responds when a situation enters an uncertain phase. The statement mattered more than its length because the palace did not say progress, recovery, or continuation. It said change, a word that in royal language means the previous framework no longer applies. For months, Catherine's treatment had been presented within a structure of guarded optimism, where time was framed as a tool, absence as temporary, and direction as implied even without specifics. But that direction has now been interrupted. The palace offered no explanation of why, how, or what comes next, and that omission was deliberate, serving as containment rather than oversight. When the palace does not elaborate, it is not due to a lack of information, but because the situation cannot yet be shaped into a stable narrative, making silence the chosen policy. Behind the scenes, the impact was immediate. Departments coordinated more tightly, communications shortened, and decisions shifted to protocol, signaling a need for flexibility rather than confidence. Prince William's absence from public comment was equally strategic. As reassurance would have required certainty, he could not responsibly project, while concern would have raised questions the palace sought to avoid. In royal households, silence is active. It creates space, slows speculation, and buys time, which is now the primary resource being managed. The confirmation also marked a shift in how Catherine was referenced, with language becoming more formal and distant, emphasizing titles over familiarity, a procedural response to rising uncertainty where the institution steps forward and the individual steps back. This recalibration suggests preparation for a prolonged period of ambiguity, a suspension, rather than a crisis, where outcomes are no longer predictable. Crucially, the statement implied neither decline nor improvement, occupying a middle ground that resists interpretation and allows anxiety to grow, something the palace understands, but does not attempt to manage without facts. Instead, it acknowledged change and withdrew, echoing past moments when the monarchy quietly shifted gears before the public fully grasped their significance, speaking only when necessary and only as much as it could. The phrase "recent developments" carried that weight, acknowledging motion without direction and activity without outcome, the most honest language the palace uses when it does not yet know how history will interpret what is unfolding. Within the royal press corps, reactions to the moment were restrained, with no dramatic headlines, anonymous briefings, or corrective guidance, reflecting a familiar pattern. When the palace wants to control interpretation, it leaks, and when it cannot, it stops. Talking this was clearly the latter. International observers noted the same absence of follow-up, signaling that this was not a communication cycle to be filled, but a line drawn, with the palace having said all it could for now. What made the confirmation unsettling was not what it revealed, but what it removed: the illusion of linear progress, the comfort of assumed timelines, and the sense that events were unfolding according to plan. Catherine, long positioned as a symbol of continuity and visible stability, could be absent when that absence was framed as temporary and paired with confidence. But uncertainty alters the equation, forcing the public to confront the reality that not everything can be scheduled, controlled, or reassured into place. The palace understands this, which is why the statement arrived without embellishment, emotional framing, or softening language. It was not meant to comfort, but to preparing the institution for flexibility, the public for absence, and the narrative for adjustment. This was not the beginning of an ending, but the end of an assumption that the path forward was already mapped. From this point on, every silence carries more weight, every absence is read differently, and every future statement is measured against this moment. Change within the palace rarely announces itself loudly. It moves quietly through phrasing, timing, and logistical decisions that only make sense in hindsight, and by the time Buckingham Palace confirmed that Catherine's treatment had taken a different direction, the shift was already underway, first visible not in medical detail, but in logistics. As provisional language disappeared from internal correspondence, and words like upcoming and expected quietly vanished, nothing publicly cancelled. Yet nothing new added. The palace entered a holding pattern, the kind reserved for moments when clarity has paused, a posture it does not adopt when confidence remains intact. Under predictable circumstances, time is made visible, absence is framed as recovery, and silence is paired with reassurance. But that balance quietly collapsed and was replaced by something colder and more deliberate. Senior aides began referring to Catherine only through formal channels. The personal tone disappeared, and communication became standardized, a procedural response that signaled rising variables and tightened discretion rather than emotion. Behind the scenes, medical consultations intensified, not out of panic but re-evaluation. Because a change in treatment does not always indicate decline, sometimes it reflects a strategy that no longer fits unfolding realities. In such moments, institutions recalibrate before they explain, and sometimes they never fully explain at all. Understanding that details invite interpretation, interpretation breeds fear, and fear demands reassurance that cannot be honestly given when outcomes are no longer linear. Rather than filling the silence, the palace widened it, a move often misunderstood. As silence in royal communication is not avoidance, but a signal that the story is unfinished, and that no ending will be narrated before it can be guaranteed. Time itself was also recalibrated. Where weeks once carried meaning, expectations were no longer anchored to calendars, confirming a deeper shift than any statement could convey, because when time loses structure, the future has become conditional. Associated briefings reflected the same change, with language growing careful and optimism removed without being replaced by concern, leaving neutrality as the default. Heavy, directionless, and stripped of progress markers or implied resolution. What remained was a single truth. The path had changed, and by admitting that, the palace was instructing the world to stop assuming, stop predicting, and start waiting, because whatever comes next is no longer following a script that can safely be shared. The first visible adjustment, however, came not from Buckingham Palace, but from Prince William himself. Not through words, but through movement. As his public presence narrowed, his schedule solidified in some areas and vanished in others, subtle enough to avoid headlines, yet clear within royal circles. By the time the palace confirmed that Catherine's treatment had taken a different direction, William was already operating under a revised framework, not reacting but preparing, shifting from representation toward containment, a transition reserved for moments when uncertainty can no longer be managed quietly. He understands the cost of premature reassurance, the risk of overexposure during instability, and the responsibility of restraint when the institution enters territory where confidence cannot yet be responsibly projected. William's job in moments like this is not to explain, but to stabilize, which is why his silence mattered. In earlier periods of public concern, he has been visible, careful in his words, and reassuring in tone. But this time his absence from commentary was intentional. As any statement would have required clarity, he could not responsibly offer, and reassurance would have created expectations the palace was no longer confident it could meet. Instead, he stepped back from public explanation and into a different form of duty, one that expanded behind closed doors as decision-making compressed and matters that once moved through multiple layers of consultation began to resolve more quickly, with William acting less as a participant and more as a final checkpoint. This authority was not performative, but structural, designed to preserve continuity when health uncertainty shifts the balance of the royal household. His public engagements reflected the same recalibration. Appearances were shorter, language more formal, and personal warmth replaced by institutional steadiness, not as emotional withdrawal, but as discipline, a deliberate narrowing of tone to avoid misinterpretation. He also removed the future from his vocabulary, making no reference to upcoming months or plans involving Catherine, a telling sign of a household no longer comfortable forecasting, where only the present could be responsibly acknowledged. As a result, protective mechanisms engaged, with William's visibility managed more tightly and his movements made predictably consistent, reassuring governments, markets, and allies through stability of form rather than transparency of detail. Those close to the household describe him as focused and restrained, not devoid of feeling, but disciplined enough to process emotion privately so continuity could be projected publicly, a distinction he learned early. Catherine's absence also reshaped how William was perceived, as he now appeared alone, carrying both presence and absence, with every word, gesture, and silence amplified, prompting the palace to tighten briefings and avoid off-record interpretation, so that silence itself discouraged speculation rather than inviting it. His restraint served another purpose as well. By refusing to narrate Catherine's condition, he protected her privacy and removed her from the cycle of public interpretation, a quiet act of loyalty that shields the future from premature conclusions. Internally, this moment has recast William not as a prince waiting, but as a figure already carrying consequence, whose calm is practiced and informed by the understanding that uncertainty does not need commentary to be felt. What makes this especially significant is that he did not step forward to reassure, but inward to consolidate, a choice that signals gravity more clearly than any statement. Not a retreat, but an assumption of weight, placing himself at the quiet center of a system preparing for flexibility rather than crisis. In moments like this, the monarchy does not announce change. It embodies it, and William, without speaking, has done exactly that. When the palace machine goes quiet, the shift is felt long before it is understood, because Buckingham Palace is not just a building but a system whose rhythm signals intent. After the confirmation that Catherine's treatment had changed, that system did not accelerate but slowed, a choice that revealed the seriousness of the moment, as speed implies control while slowness signals assessment. Activity inside the institution did not stop. It narrowed, with departments that usually operate independently moving into tighter alignment and communications, security, scheduling, and diplomatic liaison, shifting into a reduced bandwidth mode marked by fewer messages, approvals, and assumptions, a posture reserved for moments when the palace is unsure which version of the future it must soon support. One of the earliest signs appeared in communication strategy, as outbound messaging dropped not only about Catherine, but across unrelated royal business, a deliberate move reflecting the palace's understanding that speculation feeds on excess information, and that silence can function as protection. There were no background briefings, anonymous reassurances, or corrective leaks, because when the palace cannot yet steer interpretation, it withdraws entirely, a decision underscored by the unusual lack of contextual guidance even for foreign press offices. Behind the scenes, staff schedules were quietly adjusted, rotations tightened, senior aides became more present, and junior staff were instructed to defer decisions upward, not as panic, but as costly caution the palace was willing to sustain. Long-term planning also paused, with initiatives later in the year neither cancelled nor actively developed, reflecting the belief that planning without certainty wastes effort, and that waiting, in this context, is watchful rather than passive. Meetings grew shorter, language more precise, and speculation was discouraged even internally, as discipline was prioritized over creativity when information remained incomplete. This restraint extended to how Catherine herself was discussed, with her name used sparingly, her situation referenced only in formal terms, and emotion removed from official conversation. Not out of indifference but containment, as emotion creates momentum, momentum breeds expectation, and expectation generates pressure the palace is determined to eliminate. Perhaps most striking was how little was said off the record, since silence usually invites leaks, yet here it did not, indicating strong internal cohesion and a shared understanding of the stakes, where premature disclosure would risk destabilizing a system, intentionally slowing itself in order to hold. The palace holds because it understands that a premature narrative can cause damage that cannot be undone. Its system is built for endurance, having survived abdications, wars, scandals, and illness, and its greatest strength is patience. When faced with uncertainty, it does not rush to resolution, but creates space for outcomes to emerge, and that is exactly the space we are witnessing now. Externally, this creates discomfort. The public seeks reassurance, and media cycles demand development, but the palace answers to continuity, not cycles, and continuity sometimes requires a silence that feels unsettling. The reduction in activity also protects Catherine, keeping her from becoming the center of constant interpretation. By limiting references and updates, her condition is moved from headlines to background reality, intentionally shielding her from exposure, which the palace knows can complicate recovery. Subtle shifts in the deployment of other senior royals further reinforced this approach. Appearances were redistributed, visibility balanced, and no individual was allowed to dominate attention, presenting steadiness through collective presence rather than personal focus, a classic maneuver when one pillar of the institution is uncertain. Importantly, the palace did not activate crisis optics, hold emergency briefings, or stage symbolic gestures. Those responses are reserved for moments of known gravity, whereas this moment is defined by unknowns, which demand flexibility, not theatre. As days pass without further clarification, the silence itself communicates that the palace is still assessing, calibrating, and waiting for information solid enough to withstand public interpretation. The institution has not stalled. It has shifted into a different gear, one designed for control rather than speed. That boundary is cautious, not cruel, and caution at this level is a form of care. Buckingham Palace is quiet because it is listening closely to what comes next. When uncertainty becomes the message, it has a presence even in the absence of words, felt in pauses between statements, in the lack of corrections, and in the careful neutrality of language that refuses to lean in any direction. This is the space the monarchy has entered and understands well. For the public, uncertainty is uncomfortable. They want to hope, worry, or act, but the palace offers only one instruction: wait. That instruction is communicated through restraint rather than direct statement, a principle visible from the moment Catherine first stepped back from public life. When Catherine first stepped back from public life, her absence was framed with patience and trust. Time was positioned as an ally, silence was contextualized, and there was a sense that the story had a gentle arc, even if its destination remained private. That framing no longer exists. The confirmation of a change in treatment removed the quiet assurance that had held the narrative together, not replacing it with fear, but with openness, an openness that allows for multiple possible outcomes. This approach is not cruel, it is honest. The palace understands that false optimism can be more damaging than uncertainty, because raised expectations become obligations, and obligations are dangerous when circumstances are fluid. Accordingly, the institution stepped back. Across Britain, the reaction was muted but intense. There were no public demonstrations, no orchestrated outpourings, only a quieter collective attention, a holding of breath. People noticed the absence of follow-up more than the initial statement, that familiar rhythms did not return, and instinctively understood that the pause mattered. Internationally, the response followed the same pattern. Foreign media avoided speculation, commentators chose words carefully, and governments took note without comment. In moments like this, silence is contagious. No one wants to be the first to interpret what has not been defined. The psychological weight of uncertainty is heavy because it resists narrative. There is no arc, no timeline, no repeated reassurance. The palace carries this weight internally as well, managing it through procedure. Contingency plans remain unspoken. Conversations produce preparedness rather than conclusions. This is realism, not pessimism. Catherine's situation is particularly resonant because of her symbolic role. She represents continuity without controversy, stability without rigidity. When someone like her becomes surrounded by uncertainty, it shakes more than personal concern. It challenges the assumption that some roles are immune to disruption. The palace responds structurally, reducing exposure, limiting information, and allowing uncertainty to exist without amplification. This is not indifference but careful management. Silence and neutrality may feel cold or distant to the public, but within enduring institutions, they are tools of care. By refusing to narrate Catherine's condition, the palace protects her experience, keeping it personal rather than performative. That protection matters. At the same time, uncertainty reshapes public perception of the monarchy, revealing vulnerability without dramatization, and showing that even highly structured institutions must sometimes wait without answers. The palace cannot control public feeling, only its own response, and that response is restraint, deliberately maintained until clarity arrives on its own terms. This choice is heavy but intentional because in royal life, the most dangerous thing is not uncertainty, it is pretending it does not exist. This moment cannot be undone. Every royal moment carries historical weight, but only some alter the future. This is one of them, not because of what was announced, but because of what was acknowledged and left unresolved. Once uncertainty is named by the palace, it becomes part of the record. The monarchy has faced illness before, speaking of recovery, rest, and resilience, using language to reassure continuity and imply direction, even when details were withheld. This moment is different because the narrative of certainty itself has been paused. The public was once asked to trust a process that was moving forward, but that framework has now shifted. Direction has been removed. The confirmation that Catherine's treatment has changed course did something rare. It altered the narrative without replacing it. It did not introduce a new story. It ended the old one. That previous story was built on quiet confidence, on the assumption that time would resolve what was unfolding, and on the belief that absence was temporary and progression inevitable. That belief no longer holds. This does not signal disaster, but it does signal recalibration. When the palace admits recalibration, it signals that outcomes are no longer predictable enough to structure around. This is not a medical statement, it is an institutional one, indicating that the monarchy is preparing for multiple futures at once. This is not a decision taken lightly. Behind the scenes, it has already reshaped how decisions are framed. Plans are no longer based on return timelines, but on adaptability. Roles are considered more broadly. Visibility is treated as optional rather than essential. The shift affects more than Catherine. It influences how the future of the monarchy is paced, presented, and protected. Catherine has long been associated with continuity, bridging tradition and modernity smoothly. Her presence smoothed transitions. Her absence now exposes how much weight that presence carried. The palace understands that once the public recognizes this, expectations will change. That is why this moment cannot be undone. Even if clarity returns or outcomes are positive, the acknowledgement of uncertainty has already reshaped perception. Silence now reads as consequential rather than temporary. The palace has carefully avoided dramatization because drama invites closure, and closure implies knowledge, which it does not yet have. Instead, it has chosen to stand still. Standing still is risky. It leaves space for interpretation, but it preserves integrity and avoids promises that time may break. The monarchy survives not by prediction, but by endurance. By acknowledging that Catherine's path is no longer linear, the palace has changed how every future appearance, absence, and statement will be read. Nothing resets after this. The public will listen differently, the press will watch more closely, silence will feel heavier, and language will be passed with greater care. That understanding shapes every decision now. What comes next may take weeks or months to define, or it may remain undefined longer than expected. Either way, the monarchy has prepared the ground by doing something rare, admitting uncertainty without disguise. That admission is not a weakness, it is restraint. It allows the institution to move forward without being bound by expectations it cannot guarantee. It gives Catherine space to exist outside a narrative that demands resolution, and gives the future room to arrive on its own terms. The palace has accepted that not everything can be controlled. In doing so, it has chosen honesty over comfort. That choice will define everything that follows. This moment was never meant to comfort, it was meant to prepare. The palace has chosen restraint over reassurance and honesty over prediction, signaling that the story is still unfolding. What happens next will arrive slowly, carefully, and on institutional terms.